But thank you for joining us on the last of the series. We've been talking about new media and all of the different options that we have for us and all the ways that we can measure and fine tune our media and really directly link it to the revenue and the traffic that we're getting to our properties. But to balance that out, I did want to talk about traditional media and how it still plays a role in our in our prospects. And so I've asked Adele to join me today. Adele George, I'm gonna let her tell you a little bit about herself, but just to let you know, Adele has been a boot camp coach teaching our casino advertising masterclass for about 4 years now. I think we started doing it during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so she is my go-to media planner, media guru, media inspiration. So Adele, I think I don't know what you want to say about AM George or anything.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure. Well, I'm coming to you from my cell phone instead of my computer because my internet just went out again. I don't know why, but it went out exactly 15 minutes before this started. My name is Adele George. I have been a media planner and buyer for the better part of 20 plus years. And I've worked and specialized with casinos for the past like 15. So I am super happy to be here to sit down and talk with you guys about all of this because I think it's important that we constantly have the conversations. Media these days is constantly evolving. We constantly have new options. And I think it's important that with digital, that you consider what is it that's going to make everything work the best and how can we balance it all out?
Yeah, I think that you know, I love all the new channels because I feel like advertising always has such a tenuous hole on the marketing budget for a lot of reasons, and some of them are very sound, and of course that's where most of my career has been. So it hurts me when budgets get cut, but I understand, having been on the operation side, that they get cut for sensible reasons, not just because. But with the advent of these digital, more measurable channels, I think it's really tempting to think that maybe TV, where TV isn't cheap. I'm not going to lie, it's just not cheap, and radio, depending on the market you're in, can be almost as expensive. And so it's easy to kind of say maybe we don't need that, but I wanted to take this time to really kind of talk about the role that it plays, because if you really understand the role that it plays, I think you do find the value in it, and we can find ways that we can measure its impact even if it's not directly related to the revenue and to the things that we can measure with the digital. So I think that we're going to start with Drew's great graphic. We've been using it over and over again, so it only makes sense that we have it to start off today. And I think Adele, maybe you wanted to take over this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all know the marketing funnel represents the journey, and it's the consumer journey starting from the very top to the very bottom of getting them, making them aware, all the way to into the door, and especially for casinos. Traditional media channels, as we know it, they play a crucial role in the top of the funnel. They do reach larger audiences, and they do tend to they do they do tend to build a strong presence. And what we're doing as we're moving through this is we're going to explore how that works. But the most important thing is to see where it fits in the funnel. But it's not only just about the funnel. It's how does this fit and work also with your database, which is a lot of what Julia has talked about as well.
Yeah, and we have that discussion about database and how you can use it to plan your media. And we talk about it in terms of traditional media as well. That's part of the discussions that we have during the advertising masterclass. But one of the things about the funnel and about traditional media is that the top of the funnel is the spark, right? It's that moment where somebody has a thought and they say, oh, if you're selling goods, somebody may think, do I need this? Oh, I think I need this. And it's that moment that starts what was it that Google, I was in a presentation earlier today and they were talking about the 0 moment of truth, that moment where they have that spark of information.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing about this is that um branding and awareness are obviously the initial stages of the marketing funnel. We have
Right.
to make people aware that you exist. And broad targeting versus highly targeting, obviously at this stage, we're getting more into a broader target,
Mhm.
and then we can tighten it up as the tightening up comes up later. And tailoring your message and the media plan to reach a broader audience is one of the best ways to utilize your database. You can duplicate your database in demographics and location in a media buy, in a TV plan, or in a radio plan, just as you can in digital. So it's important that you provide that information to your agencies and your buyers, because that's what can give us a good kickoff in making sure that we can duplicate and reach your existing players and new players.
And one of the topics that we cover in the masterclass is actually it's part of the database, but it's also the personas and really kind of understanding the target that you're trying to reach with the media. In the same way that you do that when you're trying to create your digital media plan, you can use that same kind of concept to develop your traditional media plan as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
and one of the other things we talk about is creative, right? So it's not just the channel that you're on, but the creative has a big piece of this puzzle, frankly, all the way through the funnel, right? So, I found this great quote from Albert Einstein. Who knew he was talking about creativity? But it is, we think about it. If she would disappear, we
Er,
think about creative kind of becomes the part of marketing that a lot of people like to like fiddle with, right? But it really is very scientific as well as artistic, because you do have to consider what part of the funnel they're in and how you deliver that message to them. So if you're at the top of the funnel and you're really just sort of creating this awareness, and this maybe uh get them to the next point of interest, but once they get into the next point, your creative is a little different. And I think that, Drew and I have had this discussion with other advertisers about kind of continuing the story as the people go along the funnel.
And Julia, I can see the Q&A. John's asking, how important is the brand message when you are rolling out awareness strategies? And I know you've talked a lot about brand and awareness strategies. And he said, hint, hint.
John, now you're speaking my love language. Yeah, I mean, I've actually been doing a lot of content lately about brand differentiation, and lately about like creating that brand ladder and understanding kind of what you can tap into in terms of the target audience's needs or wants, and how important that is and how you develop your creative. So yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely, when people don't know who you are, and it's typical in markets where a new operator comes in, right? And I know that doesn't happen a lot anymore, but if I'm telling my age, when I started in the industry, I mean, a lot of people were going into new markets, operators that, either the market wasn't as familiar with regional gaming because they only really thought about it in terms of Las Vegas and Atlantic City, or they were already operators in the area and they were the new one coming in. And so really kind of putting that brand statement out there so that people kind of have a sense of like what they can expect. And again, as they go down the funnel, that expectation has to be filled. So yeah, I mean, I think the brand messaging is very important in terms of like that top level funnel. It's not the point where you can start to make a sale, right? I mean, it's not the point where somebody, when they're just in branding and awareness, it's like my creative director says it's like dating. He says, you're not going to marry somebody when you first meet them. You have to date them for a while and get to know them. I mean, the marketing funnel kind of is that same sort of process. Skeet's going to be so happy that I used his analogy. And as we were saying, no one ever starts at another stage. They always start in the branding and awareness, even if it's a short little pass through it.
Yeah. And we have to pique their curiosity. So going from driving the interest in all of this, what's next? They're gonna go for research.
Mhm.
They're gonna want to find out more information.
Yeah, and I think that's, you think about in terms of a campaign, and the campaign may have different stages, and even though the message kind of evolves little by little, all in that same campaign, because you design your campaign to bring people, to guide people through the funnel.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, moving customers along the funnel.
Right. And I'm doing this off of some notes over here because obviously I can't see this. But everyone starts at the awareness stage. It's crucial to drive the interest in the research. We really need to tickle their fancy. We really need to make sure that people have, that not only are they aware that you exist, but they get that curiosity to find out more information. So this is like their first, like, oh, let's figure this out, and this is also where you can capture and start nurturing leads as well, and not moving them through the funnel.
Yeah, and I know that leads is more like sort of B2B um prospect, but you can apply the same principles B2C, right? Because leads are all about those people who, don't know you very well yet, but are starting to get to know you, right? It's the same thing, B2B or B2C. Um, and again, when you talk about the creative and the media, you know, the thing about traditional media is that I think it is well suited for telling a bigger story, and telling more of your brand and who you are and what you can provide and the value that you have. Um, that's not to say that the digital outlets can't do the same thing. It takes a lot more work, right? It's kind of like a billboard. You can do so much on a television ad, you could only do so much in a billboard. And so you have to really you have to think through it really well and understand where that person is in the funnel, and then be able to like give them the right images, the right content.
Exactly.
Right. And I know that one of the things that we talked about, Adele, when we were talking about branding and awareness is that, how do you measure that? Because you really can't, it's not something that I would ever tell somebody they can skip. Because
Right.
like I said, people have to get to know you first. They have to like sort of start to get that interest and that spark. Um, and I feel like what we sometimes don't do in that stage is really think about measuring it in the best way. Um, Share of voice is something that I've always used in the past. I know that it's not an exact report. Like I always wish they were like perfectly in dollars, but I think that when you get share of voice from the outlets, it gives you a sense of where you are in terms of the share of voice in the market.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And intent to visit is a great way to include any kind of surveys.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, for anyone who's doing any kind of market surveys or customer satisfaction surveys and are looking at any kind of competitors or non-loyal guests or people that are gambling someplace else, asking questions like, what casino do you think you'll visit in the next 3 months or in the next month? That's always a really good gauge. And if you can get a benchmark at one point before you start running your campaign, and you start to see, measure it at midway through and then at the end, you should be able to see that intent to visit change if your message was correct and if you had put enough out there for branding and awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for top of mind awareness, we talk a lot about reach and frequency. This is where reach and frequency comes into play in the structure of your media plan. And I talk about this kind of in the opposite direction of the funnel, but it still functions. Years ago, reach and frequency were numbers that I had to reach in a media plan and in a TV buy and a radio buy. And these were things that were very specific and very specific goals that we had to do. Now, what's happened because of There's so many different ways to advertise and so many different touch points. Reach and frequency becomes stackable. So it's like the funnel as it gets more narrow and more direct as you do it, but you'll start with like TV and radio and outdoor. Then you'll move to stuff like print, which is a smaller, can be a smaller audience. But then you move into digital, where digital, obviously, you can tell, you can instruct who you want to target, and you can look into social media and things like that. So each one of these layers, it stacks upon each other. So reach and frequency now go up, and they go up in a way where if you have consistency in messaging and imaging, they're going to follow you all the way through. And that's where you're going to be able to continue to drive those purposes through each part of the funnel. And I think it's really important to understand how they stack and how, and so I would just have to flip it over to match the funnel.
So, you mentioned reach and frequency, and I know that that was the discussion that we had in the last session that we did for the masterclass, because now some of those media buys are starting to show up with impressions so that they kind of match the measurement that you're getting with the digital, so that you can maybe, is it apples to apples or?
Impressions, I don't feel like the impressions are apples to apples because the delivery method is different. I don't feel like I can take digital impressions and television and radio impressions and add them together and then tell a client that I got them 10 million impressions.
Mhm.
Because the delivery method is so different, and because how you target it and how you do it is different as well. Drew, you're piping in?
Yeah, well, no, I was just going to say we had a question that popped up from Douglas. Question is, how do you measure prospective and active local players versus out-of-towners versus destination visitors? That's question one. And then the next one is it by distance in miles, drive time, or method of travel to the property, like air travel? And then last, do the message exposures increase as the cohort of prospects / players reside closer to the property?
Doug, you're always making me think.
3-part.
So I think that there's kind of two things in the question, right? Because we are, from our database perspective, we do think in terms of active, inactive, local, regional, tertiary, or whatever term you want to use for that outer market. And I don't know that we've necessarily used those same terms in the media buys, but you can divide up your media buy that way, because you can say the frame of mind that a local person has is completely different than what a regional person will have. And a tertiary person is going to look for a different type of experience. And Drew, I think you and I had this discussion when we were talking about a casino out on the West Coast, because they were spending some of their traditional dollars in a market that was a little over 2 hours away. And they were running like their daily, everyday promotion, the kind of thing that's like, here's the senior program, here's the drawing this week. And what we were saying was, because those people are so far out, their frame of mind and what they're looking for is, in this case, it was a getaway. So it had to be a different campaign that nurtured them through the funnel, because they're looking for a different experience. And I think that that's what you have to really kind of think about. If you're you can take your media plan and really divide it out, but you have to really give it thought in terms of like understanding what they're looking for and the channels that are going to not overuse a term, move them along, right? Not every channel is going to be right for every market, because of the kind of message that is going to apply to them may not be the right thing.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Do we have any more questions, Drew?
Yeah, another one came in from John. Thoughts on managing multiple outlet strategies in funnels? So gaming, food and beverage, hotel, and entertainment, driving from the overall casino brand to outlet conversion.
So here's the thing. I think that one of the things that some operators understand this and some don't, and some are in the middle, right? But I think that when you think about your brand has to be about everything, the whole experience. So, and if you really have a good focus on your brand, not that this session was supposed to be about branding, if you really understand your brand, you'll understand that food and beverage outlet is right for us. This one is not, right? If you're going to be the value casino in the region, right? You're going to be value. You're going to have, loose slots. You're going to have low ATM fees, whatever way value comes out. To have a high-end steakhouse is probably not the right fit in there. So yeah, so that it has to start first with like having the right outlets and amenities that match the brand. But yeah, you can do in the same way, you're going to do different messages if you're really just driving the, not that we have buffets anymore, but when you were doing like crab legs, that's just crab legs. And that's probably, a local person that's coming in. You're not going to spend, television dollars in a market that's 100 miles out for crab legs, unless for some reason crab legs are just so hard to find that you're the only one that's got them, right? But you may put it into a message that's 100 miles away that's about a whole destination and make a weekend of it. And we got this and this and this. So I think that you do have to think about what that mindset is, and you can manage it differently. It's a lot of work, but that's why you have a really great media planner. We see.
Good on the question.
Okay, and then if you're, as we were saying, you got to bring them along. So the branding and awareness level is kind of where that spark happens. That moment where somebody either thinks they're going to look for something, or they're looking for some information that they want to know more about, and then they get into that intent. So that's what you want to do. If your marketing and advertising has done this job well, then people are going to start to dig deeper. And, one of the things that we were talking about, which, wasn't immediate, it's not a media discussion, but it is part of our advertising strategy because, again, a conversation Drew and I had, if you're going to do banner ads all over the place, you want people to be able to click on them and get to a website that has a similar message that continues that story. So, but there's a lot of stuff that, we've been having a lot of conversations about the change from Google and from Universal Analytics to G4. And I'm surprised. I mean, I had to say to somebody the other day, you're less than 60 days away and you're going to lose all that data. So you need to like set this up and that's like a bigger thing, but there's still little things, some casinos still have really outdated websites. And I don't mean outdated in terms of like the images and the clothing that people wearing, but it's not necessarily as user-friendly as you want it to be. I was telling Adele when we were talking about this, there's a lot of best practices that you can look at. I mean, there's a lot of smart people that are web developers that will tell you like your site has to have this. I get an email. I don't get one email. I get probably like 5 or 6 emails every week from somebody that says, I want to congratulate you on your website. It looks so great, but, which is their pitch to do some work. But anyway, there's 2 comments that really stuck out to me as I was talking to some people. So last year, I was at a conference and Ryan McGrath from Millax Ventures, which is the Grand Casinos in Minnesota. He was saying that people plan their adventures at your casino through your website. So they go to your website to figure out what it is they're going to want to do and to sort of map out their time with you. And having, the kind of information that helps them create that adventure is really important. And another thing that somebody said to me, Francis Kaiser from Every, we were talking about technology, just a conversation about technology. And I asked him because I had somebody who's a casino that does not have an app. There was a time in like the early 2000s that everybody was getting an app. And they basically were app versions of the website. They weren't really, giving a lot of value. Now, some of the operators have developed really great apps that add a lot more value. They're great portals to your offers. Some of them are using them for cashless. So, there are some people that are doing that really well. But what he said to me was, when people see your commercial or see a message and you do spark that need to dig deeper and go to it, they generally will they'll go to their device and they will search for your name. It could be the desktop, but more than likely it's a telephone these days. And a lot of websites are not as mobile friendly as they should be. And now Google is saying, even if your traffic isn't majority through the website, if you don't have a really good mobile site, they're dinging you in search results. And if you're spending money on SEO, that's gonna hurt you. So they're, those two things just seem, and they can be big projects and they can be very manageable projects all at the same time. But I think that it's very important that if you're doing any kind of advertising, if you're trying to spark interest and trying to get people to dig deeper, make sure that where they dig is friendly territory for them. It's very usable for them, and the same thing goes with social media. Social media is another place where people are searching, and you've heard Meta say this. TikTok is talking about how people are using the platform for search now. And it really is very important, so it's not really just about being there. It's about understanding your audience and building the following that you're trying to attract. It's about building a presence on the right social media networks. And I know that there's this big discussion about TikTok. Is it going to get banned? Is it not? Is it right for me? Is it not? Again, that's part of knowing your target audience and understanding whether they're there or not. Do you have enough people to be able to manage all the channels? Sometimes you have to just pick the channel that's going to give you the best results. Always being strategic is always better than being just clever. I always say, try to make 75% of your posts, have part of your strategy in it. And then the other 25 you can play around with and experiment, because you never know when you're going to find something that's going to kind of spark more of that. And always audit the performance of your social efforts, but audit also, keep an eye on your analytics and what's happening on your website. I think that helps you manage your media plan as you go along too.
Well, yeah, and I just want to add, all of your online platforms, your Google business, make sure that, your Yelp, any place where you may be listed, make sure that it's up to date. It has accurate pictures and up-to-date information, and that you've claimed it on all of the necessary businesses within the casino, like the restaurants and different things like that. Because when people are going to look for information, they're going to find it wherever they're going to find it. And 98% of the time, it'll probably be your website. But the other half of the time, there's Yelp, there's Google Business and different things like that, where people are going to stumble across information.
And, going back to John's comment about managing the different outlets and different media strategies for them, that's even more important, to make sure that all your outlets that you've claimed the Google My Business, that you're putting the content up there, because when people search, you want them to find that information, the information you want them to have.
Yep.
And managing it too, because people will write comments. I know some of know Jim White, and he works for a medical facility, and sometimes they've had to have comments removed because they were genuinely spam. So it's really important to make sure that you know that.
Yeah, exactly.
Another question popped up. Do you recommend multiple language website content? So for example, English, Spanish, Chinese dialects, specifically for John Wick, Kickapoo, and Texas. Do you have English and Spanish versions of your website?
So I always think that you should. So, and nowadays it's as simple as a plugin to translate your website. The only thing that makes me hesitant is, and we do Hispanic marketing through our agency, when you have done something in Spanish, but then there's nobody that speaks Spanish at the property level. And so your experience gets, to be a little bit of a disaster. That's always a problem. But usually if you're in a market that has a lot of Hispanic, a lot of Asian, a lot of whatever, you usually have people on staff that speak the language too. But yes, I would absolutely recommend it. Like I said, it's a simple plugin. And I don't know what that plugin is, but I know Jill Manti told me what it was. And I can find out if somebody needs it. And I think that now once you get into, consideration, the balance in your advertising really shows up, right? Making sure your advertising investments and your media plan matches the customer journey and your database. Like I said, when you want to, going back to the brand discussion, I'm sure that anybody on this call can quickly account for 5 casinos that they've seen advertise or position themselves as luxury or high end, but they're really just a really great, fun place to be. And people like really fun places. So there's no shame in being the fun place and advertising and positioning yourself that way. I think it's very important that your advertising messages and the investments you make match the customer journey and the database that you have. Because now that you have them here, you want to keep them there.
Yeah. And I mean, and the thing is that this is another great point in the funnel to really evaluate how you're maximizing your reach and frequency. How are you really targeting now that you have them, now that we have them in consideration? What does the reach and frequency look like for you to get them to take the next step, whatever that next step is? Whether it's coming for entertainment, spending the night, just coming to game, coming to eat, whatever it is. What does that look like for you? And how do we get them there?
So Adele, do you think that when you does your reach and, I think you said your reach and frequency gets a little bit more targeted. So maybe it's smaller numbers as you go through the funnel?
Yeah, it's smaller numbers in the sense that you shouldn't be doing, when you're at the point of consideration, it's no longer broad targeting. When a person is considering, they want to know what you have. So
Right.
at this point, they've already gone to your website once. We've already sent them there at least once. At this point, they might go back and dig deeper. So they might look at the amenities you have. They might look at the restaurants you have. They might look at the various things that you offer, even outside of like just promotions, to see what, oh, they have a spa, oh, they have a great restaurant or whatever. Oh, they have a steak restaurant. I want to go eat there. To drive them to make the decision to go there. There's always, I think that decision making in general is always going to be layered in the same way.
Mhm.
So when we get them to this consideration point, you really, and it does go back to the website, basically having your website tuned up as best as you possibly can in all formats, because you want people to be able to engage and then tip them over the consideration into moving into the next phase of making the decision to go.
Yeah, engagement is really part of that whole consideration. I think the most important part, another great quote from Harley Davidson, he said, the more you engage with customers, the clearer things become and the easier it is to determine what you should be doing. But it also is clearer for them what they want to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because there's so many different points of contact happen when they're in this consideration, research, interest stage, right? And so I think that one of the things that, when we're limited in our budgets, we tend to narrow the number of channels and the number of outlets we use. And so, but I think that this is a point where actually you can't get too low in the reach and frequency. You've got to think about constantly talking to them. And I think that, Drew, we talked about how you get sort of that awareness, that kind of high level digital placements, but then you start hitting them with a little bit more and you start talking to them in different channels as they go through this funnel.
Yeah,
definitely. Absolutely. Lots of different ways to continue to kind of move them down too. And, and that's why I think it's important to make sure that, digital, traditional, it needs to be strategized together. Yeah. It's the ad they get on their phone, and then they might be driving on the highway and then see the billboard that makes them then really truly want to engage. So I don't think there's any one platform that, you should be putting everything into. Right. It needs to still be a well-rounded plan, which is obviously what we're talking about today.
Well, I think also in the consideration stage, you probably have a more targeted reach. So you're narrowing the number of people you want to talk to. And so you naturally do increase the frequency because you're talking to less people, right? That's just the math, as the girl said on the seminar I was on earlier today. The maths. And this is kind of at the stage is where the funnel can start to leak, right? We talked about how this is where we can start breaking things down, because if the site that isn't, doesn't have the information, if we provided them with a click through to a page that had nothing to do with the message that we had on there, that's where you get your bounces. If you go to, if you're advertising something, again, going back to the, luxury high-end thing, but then you start looking at the Yelp reviews and it doesn't tell that story. This is where places start to leak.
Yeah. And it's really important to, especially at this part of the funnel, it's really important to see if you have leaks and where they are and what can we do, because what can you do to plug them up? Because if we're putting one message out there and another message is happening, then that's a waste of money.
Yeah. I don't like to waste money on advertising because I get my budget cut if I do.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, it's about balancing. I think that we said probably if we had $1 every time we said balance, we probably could go to lunch. But
Right.
Drew said it too. It's about balancing your advertising, and this is kind of where it really starts to show up as you start to narrow your focus, making sure that your advertising matches the customer journey, and maximizing that reach and frequency, but also tracking, right? So we have to start making sure that we're tracking what we're doing and understanding if it's moving the needle. So we talked about in the top end of the funnel, the branding and awareness, how you can start looking for things that are a little bit more qualitative, right? That kind of intent to visit, that top of mind, that, what is it? Top box score, and share a voice. But again, circling back to Google Analytics, and it's funny because I asked Drew if he had like a great report to show, and he goes, I just use Google Analytics. And this is really ideal because there's so many ways that you can just kind of go through Google Analytics to see where your traffic is coming from. Are you moving the needle? Is it making a change? One of the reports that I always look at is this one that's Medium and Sources. I also look at campaigns. This one is a casino. So you can see that they've got like CPC, they got over the top. They have some recruitment campaigns that they're doing. So they're kind of can see where they're spending their money and how it's actually generating traffic or not. And I think that we always kind of encourage people to do that. One of the things that I always tell people to try to do is use unique tracking codes. So UTMs. Google Analytics has this free thing. You just punch in a couple of things and boom, you've got, a trackable code. Did I put that in there? Oh, it's not showing. So when you do the UTM, you can put in the URL where you're directing people to. You can create a campaign ID. You can create, you can put the source and it'll create a trackable link for you. And somewhere in here was a link to a Google Sheet. I have a Google Sheet that actually all you have to do is plug it into the Excel sheet, and that way you have a record of it. Because that's one of the things I always came into trouble with. I create a unique tracking code, and then I didn't have it any place to remember what I did the last time, and I ended up with too many campaigns. But I have a Google Sheet that I'm happy to share with you, and it's basically the same thing. It's just in an Excel form, Google Sheets, but you can make it into Excel. And you just put in same thing, put in the URL, you put in the campaign name, the source. If you're doing, I don't know if Drew agrees with this, but a lot of times when I'll do digital ads, I'll do, the message, and I might put like the size that they are, so I can see like which sizes are working better than what. So I try to get a little detailed in it so that I can make some adjustments as we go along. And I'm happy to share that link to the Google Sheet. Then you can just make a copy of it and use it yourself. Um, and then, we talked about, the customer journey, yay, now we've converted them and they're visiting the property, right? All of the advertising that we did and all the fabulous channels that we, selected and the way we targeted just worked perfectly. And now they've come into the property and you think you've done your job, but it's not, because conversion also includes the experience people have when they walk in the door. This is a customer journey map. We do customer journey mapping at some of our boot camp events, so it's always kind of fun. But it's always a good exercise to really kind of think about how the customer goes through the journey. And frankly, starting with how they see their messages, what messages they see, what they do when they come in the door, who greets them or not. What is it like when they go get a card? What is it like when they try to find the bathroom? Players card and bathroom, two biggest questions people always have. Make them easy for people to get to. But understanding that customer journey, when you go to the buffet, are you standing in a big old line while, there's a VIP line that's empty for the two people that might be there on a Tuesday afternoon? What do we do to change that experience? Restaurants have this metric of table touches. How many times does a server or wait staff go to the table? There's always oh, thank you for coming. They put down the waters. How long does it take for somebody to take a drink? Order how many, when you do jackpots, looking at how we pay out jackpots and the process, sometimes you can find really great instances where you can find a better customer journey touch point than you had before. Things like when you lock up the machine to do the paperwork, sometimes you don't have to lock it up for that long. Sometimes you can record the information, unlock it, and let people keep playing, because that's the biggest thing they want to do is keep playing. So that's kind of that leakage, right? So that conversion, all these little breakages in the customer journey is what causes the leak. And so part of the process being marketers is also the customer journey and walking in the shoes of the customer and figuring out what they need and what we can do to make it better.
Yeah, and Julie and I have frequently had this conversation in our advertising masterclass, where we talk about the effectiveness of the advertising. We talk about the stackable of it. We talk about moving it through the funnel, but we can't ignore the fact that when people walk in the door, this is what the whole thing is about and the whole point of it. So when people walk in the door, and what is their impression? What is their experience? How do they feel? Because you've put great ads out there. You've reached them in all the touch points. You've got them moving through the funnel. You've got them interested, and you've got them where they want to go. And now they're walking in the door. So we can't, again, waste the money for the advertising and walk them in the door, and then they're not going to be completely thrilled when they walk in there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is about a guest is they can choose to get off the road to loyalty anytime they want, right?
Yep.
So, if someone goes inactive, metaphorically, they go back to the top of the funnel. Maybe they don't spend as much time in the awareness as they did originally, but you start to have to if they get inactive, you start to have to make them more aware. This is why we send out mailers to inactive saying, look how we've changed in the 6 months that you've been there. There's not a real break between conversion and loyalty, which is why it's so easy to lose a customer. But also, if the experience is matching what you're promising and what you're marketing, then you can solidify the relationship. But I think it's always important to realize guests can get off the road anytime they want. And we've got to be able to, find a way to get them back in. But we also sometimes have to bring them right back through the funnel again. Sometimes they'll go faster, but they're still going through the funnel all over again.
Yep, exactly.
I think that is that was my last.
Yep.
I love that slide. I'm gonna have to use it in a social media post. I'm gonna stop this share and go back here. I guess some housekeeping. We're gonna get the recording. If you want the link to the Google Sheet, let me know, and I'll send it to you with the recording. But if there are any more questions, we're happy to answer them. Now that I can see it. If not, we will let everybody go back to work. I feel, yesterday I was saying about somebody who mentioned their product too often, and I feel like I said casino advertising masterclass like 50 times. So I'm really sorry that I did what I said I didn't like from somebody the other day. All right. Thank you so much. And Marie, I'm not going to forget you this time. I'm going to send you the recording. I forgot it the last time. Thank
Thanks,
you.
y'all.